Hello everyone, welcome back to Littler House. We are continuing our quilted house jacket today. Let me show you where we're up to and then we'll get on to the next steps. So you'll remember last time I cut the front and back pieces together so that I could keep this integrated hem that was already part of the quilt. So I wanted that detail down the center front and across the hem. And I thought it would be easiest to do that by cutting the front half and back half together, already joined instead of a side seam here. And what I have left is the center back as a seam rather than a fold now. So I'll put a slit in the bottom of this, but otherwise we'll have a seam up the back. So this is the other side, and you can see how that will meet down the center front here and be a cute little additional detail. I have cut my pockets out as well. I have left that same bound edge detail for the top edge of the pocket, and I think I'm going to place them with the stripes showing. That's the wrong side of the quilt technically, but I think that will look really cute to have the stripe detail there. And then I've also cut my sleeves, and again on the sleeves we have the detail hem still intact. So this is also going to save us a lot of time. We will not have to hem the bottom, the front center, or the sleeves at all. So they're all done. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to apply my binding. So you'll recall that I had a white store-bought bias binding on a roll, and that's what I'm going to use. And before I get started with actually sewing these pieces together, I'm going to bind the raw edge of almost all of them. So certainly the pocket edges we will do the center back, we will do the neckline. The reason I'm doing this before I sew the pieces together is because I want to do what's called a Hong Kong finish or a bound seam finish on the inside seams. And it's much easier when the pieces are flat like this and not already sewn together. So I'm going to show you that. So if we think through this, what we need to bind, as I mentioned, center back, we will do the sleeve. Once we sew this dart together, we will not do this neckline edge. This is a raglan sleeve, so it will come up like this. So this top part of the sleeve is actually makes part of the neckline. We're going to leave that raw without the binding for now. We will need to bind the dart, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew the dart together first and then bind it together, because we will be pushing this dart towards the back. And if I bind both edges first and then sew it together, I'm adding 4 additional layers from the binding. And we don't want to do that. So we will sew the dart together and then bind it. Bind the edges of the sleeves, bind the center back, and then we will wait until we set the sleeve in before we will bind the neckline, I think. And that way, because this is going to be here, right, as part of the neck, and it'll come around the back. So I think getting then the pieces sewn together and then we can bind the neckline all at once is the right way to do that. So I'm going to get set up at my sewing machine, swap the cameras so that you can see the sewing machine while I work on the next steps. So stay tuned and join me for that. So as you'll remember, I have this store-bought bias binding that I am going to use to bind my edges. So what I need to do is just make sure that I cut a piece that is long enough plus a bit extra for my pocket edge. Now, with a store-bought bias binding, well, any bias binding actually, you are going to have it double folded like this. It's folded halfway into the center, and then the other edge is folded the other way into the center again. Now, in order to apply this, we're actually going to unfold it, stitch it right sides together like this along this line, and then it will fold up and over, and we'll stitch again to catch the other side, and we'll have a nicely bound edge. So that's what we're going to do first. Now I'm going to go ahead and just leave this end sticking out like this, because what will happen is once I have this stitched and I go to fold it to the back side, I will fold this first and then I'll fold it the rest of the way. And that will give me a bit of a folded edge there, but it'll be on the inside and I'm not too worried about that. And that will look nice and finished that way. I'm not going to pin this in place simply because I've been doing this long enough that I don't need to anymore to keep control. If you feel more comfortable though, by all means, you can pin this so that it's easier to control. Now, here is my fold line. I'm going to stitch about 1 millimeter or 2 to the right of that fold line. The reason I'm doing that is to give me a little bit of extra to go all the way around. And that will help me cover the seam in the back. Now, when I get down here to the bottom, what I'm going to do is stop the same distance away from the edge of the bottom that I have for my seam allowance up here. So you can see I'm going to measure that. This is actually 3/8 of an inch, which is exactly where I want that to be. So down here I want to stop 3/8 of an inch from my edge. So I need a couple more stitches. That should be about right. Yep. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this so that I will stitch diagonally off the corner. Back stitching when I get to the point and cutting my thread. What I have done now is lay the foundation for a mitered corner for my binding. I stitched along the edge, turned and went 45-degree angle to the corner. Now I'm going to fold the fabric along that 45-degree stitching line, and then I don't know if you can see it, it's very difficult to see, but this is my edge, right? Follows along from here. I'm going to fold this binding back again, lining up that edge. There we go. And I'm going to fold it, I'm going to line it up along my bottom edge here now. And as you can see, this is folded along the 45, lining up perfectly with this edge and this edge. And we're going to start sewing again. That will give us a perfect mitered corner. Exactly the same again. Turned and sewed off to the corner at a 45-degree angle. I will take the remaining tail of my binding, fold it up on the 45-degree, and then back down, lining up the edge again. First couple of times you do this, you probably want to pin this. It will be easier. I have sewn quilts longer than I have sewn garments, so that's something I'm very used to doing. But if you're new to it, by all means, pin it in place. Okay, so that is my binding sewn onto the right side. Now, you'll be able to see here, this starts to make that mitered corner for me. And as I fold this around, and we push it into place and we'll stitch that, we have this lovely mitered corner. So to turn this to fold this to the other side and finish my stitching, I am actually going to use pins now. And the reason is because I need to ensure that this folded edge covers the stitching line. Now, this is quilted fabric, so I'm sorry, there's stitching lines all over the place. But this straight stitching line that hopefully you can see here, this is the one we just sewed. I need my folded edge of my bias binding to cover that stitching line, because I'm going to be stitching near enough back on top of it again, and I need to catch this edge on the back side. So I'm going to pin it to make sure that it is folded far enough and covers that stitching line all the way around. We're going to start here by folding the raw edge in, kind of tuck it here and fold it over. So hopefully you can you can see that. Now, remember, this is the inside of a pocket. It's going to be impossible to see. So this doesn't have to be exactly perfect. There is iron-on quilting basting tape, by the way, that I often use for this when it's critical. This is not so critical because if I have to go back and fix some of this, it doesn't matter. Again, this is inside a pocket. It will be impossible for anyone to see it. But if this was going to potentially show, then I will often baste this down with an iron-on quilter's basting tape. I'll show you that sometime in a video because I think you'll find it handy. But that's an easy way to also ensure you get the coverage you need here without pinning. Okay, when I get to the corner, I'm just going to pull that over neatly. Make sure that my 45-degree angle here is nice and neat as well. And then using my fingernail to hold this in place, I'll fold this up and just make sure it's nice and neat. That's all I'm trying to do here. All right, so there is our bound pocket. I will give it a press and that will get rid of these sort of little wrinkles that you often get when you sew bias binding on. And as you can see on the back side, we caught the edge all the way around. Here we are all pressed, and I am happy with that. We'll carry on putting our quilted jacket together in the next video. Make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss it. See you later.